Hey friends, I'm Daniel Nesbitt, and we're back designing a serif font in glyphs-mini. In the last episode, we made some pretty significant progress with the lowercase, so I thought in this episode it might be fun to jump back to the uppercase a little bit and just kind of play a little bit of catch-up with some of the similar letters that we skipped over when we were back on the uppercase a few episodes ago. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in, and one of the first letters that I wanted to start with was the E. And why the E? Well, naturally it makes sense that it's got a lot in common here with our H, so it just makes it a good starting point to start figuring out how this is going to look. Now, the interesting thing about an E, and I may have mentioned this in the sans serif series, but maybe I didn't, who knows. But one thing that we want to do is give it a little bit of shape, and for that there's two things I'm doing. Now the crossbar in the middle here is pretty self-explanatory, I think. And actually, before I get too far, we're going to go ahead and set the side bearings here as well. But one of the things that I always keep in mind with an E is that we actually want to have this top bar here not come out as much as the bottom bar. Visually, it's going to look similar, and I only moved it back 10 points here. But if we were to bring it back out all the way, sometimes, and for some typeface designs, it actually becomes more evident, but it starts to look a little bit funky. So I'm actually thinking I might even go back 20 points instead, just to give it a little bit of flair. And then for the crossbar here, I am going to go ahead and just keep this in the same position that it was on the H, just to provide some consistency there. And what we're also going to do is grab a copy of our serif here, and then if I rotate this around, I'll just do 90 degrees there. Now obviously that's a little bit on the large side, so I'm not going to keep it that quite to that size, but we're just going to kind of get that in place here. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make another copy of that, and for starters I want to see how this would look if we just position it there, and I'm just matching up my top point there, and then we'll make a copy of that and move it down to here. Do the same thing. And then all that's left to do for these is just to come back and delete a couple of points here. So I'm going to grab those and just push those into place. So already we're almost done with the E. Now I mentioned, and you kind of see how ridiculous this looks, there's a lot going on with that center crossbar there. That was actually more than I was expecting, if I'm honest. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break my rules a little bit, and I think I went at about 50 points there. We're going to see if something like that might work. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring these down a little bit, and what I'm doing, so you can see this, is I'm trying to visually match this with this. So that's what I'm doing when I'm pushing these around. And really there's no rhyme or reason to this. But I think something like that will work. Now with this smaller piece here, I think all I'm going to do is just make sure that my negative space around the shape looks pretty even. Because I think when I back up, it's actually going to work out pretty well here, and I've got the L there as well, which actually is a good point that I probably should take a look at here. So I am liking how that E lines up, and I think we're just going to go ahead and update this one as well, so now we've got some consistency there. But if I back off a little bit, that isn't looking too bad. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead, I think these serifs are kind of playing with us a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and just widen that E out some, just so it looks like it fits in a little bit better with everything else going on here. Then we'll go ahead and update those metrics, which was just Control-Command-M on the keyboard, if you're wondering when I do that. And then we're just going to bump that crossbar kind of back into place there a little bit, so it kind of creates that even space. So what I'm looking at here then, with all this being said and done, is that the E seems to fit in pretty well with the shape of the H here, and it also fits in width-wise. It doesn't feel like it's too narrow here. While I have all these letters up, naturally the next letter I'm going to be looking at is the F. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and set up my metrics there. And as you might imagine for the F, it's just as easy as popping some of those out. So that'll get us a little bit of the way. Now, one thing that I may consider here is actually bringing down the crossbar a little bit. And the reason for that is I've got a little bit of space now to play with because I don't have that bottom line there. And ideally all I'm doing is just trying to fill up the space a little bit so that it feels like it's taking up more of the space. Width-wise, it doesn't seem like it's too bad. I could go and probably even bump this out by 20 points again, just to give it kind of the same overall width as the E there. But I think that's going to look pretty good. Yeah, and you can kind of tell it's kind of got a similar shape going on as the L if we were to have flipped the L over. So I think that's feeling pretty good. And if I jump back to my overall glyph screen here, both those characters seem to line up pretty well with everything else so far. So we're making some good progress here. So next on the list, we're actually going to jump over to the T. And for the T, I'm going to use probably the L as my starting point. I suppose I probably could have used the H too, but I think this will work for our purposes here. So just a couple housekeeping things before I get too far into the weeds building this character out. We're just going to go ahead and flip that upside down. I guess I've pretty much just made enough at this point. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and do my best to center this up roughly. There's really no rhyme or reason to what I'm doing with that right now. I'm also going to go ahead and get rid of that top serif. And for the time being, I'm just going to make a copy of that top crossbar, and I'm just going to flip it. And the reason that I'm doing it this way is it just allows me to easily grab a couple points and then center everything up, which doesn't look like I'm too far off right now. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to bring this side over a little bit. And I'm just using these two as kind of a rough way to line things up. But as you can imagine, we'll just have one piece going across there. So let's bring back in the E, the F, the H. And if I'm honest, I'm actually not too far off, I don't think. It actually doesn't look too bad at all. From a technical standpoint, if we want to call it that, I'm actually pretty close in width to the L, if not exactly on. And I'm actually reasonably happy with that. I guess I don't have to do a whole lot there, but you see that it's starting to really take shape here. So make sure my fingers are in the right space on the keyboard. But if I throw out a word here, the word little, it looks like it's fitting in pretty well. Or even if I did title, I'm just thinking of words with T's in it, that seems to be lining up pretty well. Definitely having one of those days where I can't type. I don't know if anybody else has this problem. But there we go. I mean, it seems to be shaping up pretty nicely here, and everything is really starting to feel like it has a pretty good weight to it. So we're going to roll with that on the T. I think that's in a good place. Now, the next one that I wanted to take a look at was the D. And for this one, I'm kind of going back and forth, but I think the P and the O might be my two friends here. For the P, we're just going to steal the stem. And then for the O, we're going to steal the whole thing. Now, outside of the the stream here, the video, I've really been thinking a lot about how I want to tackle the D, because there's a couple ways I could do this. I could do a straight on, where this line just curves up and goes straight across here, or I could do something similar to the P as well. And I think just because that's kind of, at least for my design style, the out there way, I was going to try that first. And to me, it looks okay, but it also looks a little bit funky as well. And I don't know if I am totally digging that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the crossbar of the H just to keep some of that consistency there. And we're going to do a couple things. First thing, I'm just going to position this crossbar where I want it to connect that way. And we'll make a copy and paste that down on the bottom here. Bring that to the bottom. And for the next part, I don't need the overshoot here. So what's handy about this particular design is that I can just grab these pieces and move them down. I'm not worried about this line because we're gonna probably get rid of that in a moment. So we'll just go through, we'll grab all of these, we'll move them together. And so what my plan is to take this edge here and just move that over. So it's just gonna line up with that point. And you probably guessed, same there as well. Looks like that lines up. And for the sake of keeping this simple, how do we want to do this? So a couple of things that I have to keep note of here is this seems to line up pretty well. I'm okay with that. And let's just see, there we go. So I just selected both these shapes, merged them together. That's how I got rid of those lines there. The pizza, as it were called, or at least that's what I was taught, and I love it, so I just have to roll with that name. I don't even know like how technical that actually is. But I think what I'm going to do is attempt to make decisions on the fly. That's what I'm going to do. We're going to move that out of the way a minute. I'm just going to take the knife tool. I'm going to, I think I'm just going to trim these here. So I'm just going to create two separate shapes. That way I can get rid of this piece that I definitely don't need. And then we'll take these pieces and move them back into place. So again, just lining up those points and then doing the same down here. Of course, making sure my piece is selected, but we'll line those up as well. And then from here, I'm just going to go through, delete those points, and we'll go through there and delete those points. So for this top bar, I think that's actually going to work out pretty well. For the bottom, it's kind of looking a little weird. And I think what's going to help me out here is that it's also actually looking too wide. So what my train of thought here is, I'm going to try and split the difference a little bit. Obviously the D has serifs, whereas the O doesn't, but just going to pull that up there just so I can reference it above. But what I'm thinking might help is just to grab all of these points and just start pushing it all the way over here. And then trying to determine what I can get away with. So the two things going through my mind at the moment is, like I've said before with other letters, I love the consistency of my angles here, so I'm a little apprehensive to change this. But what I'm thinking is that it might look better if I do something like that. And I'm a little torn on how to handle that. I mean, width-wise, I might have even gone a little bit too narrow there, so we're just going to bump it out by, I don't know, 20 points. Maybe a little bit more than 20 points. And do 40. And I'm just kind of comparing it to the P here as well. And, you know, actually, now that I think about it, maybe the P is an easier character to riff off of here. Although I think that puts me back to the wider character there, but we'll go with it. That is a lot of white space though. So actually what I'm going to do, we're going to maybe go in like by 20 points. I think that should be fine. So I do like that lines up a little bit nicer, but it does kind of look a little bit funky at the same time. I think what I'm going to do, maybe this works, is to just mimic that. It does look a little flat, but I think that could be okay. You know what, we're gonna roll with that, see just how that works. This may be a letter, and this is one thing that I do quite a bit, but this may be a letter that I actually just come back to as things start to shape up a little bit more, because I'm not exactly sure if that's going to sit well with me. The other thing that I did kind of notice is that this O does feel a little bit narrow now, but I might just have to write out some more words just to kind of get a feel for that. But it does seem like my round characters probably could benefit from a little bit of width there. And so we'll just have to figure out how that might look. And part of me wonders if it would even benefit from more overshoot as well, which is totally possible. Let's see how that looks. So I really only went by like 20 points there, which I don't even know if that's enough to make a difference. Maybe it isn't. We'll bring that back up to 40 there as well. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things where I think just being a little bit wider is probably going to help that out some. So again, as you start building characters and start getting more letters under your belt with this, more things like this crop up, and that's can make things a little bit of a challenge, I think. But we'll just kind of let that go for now. So the last one that I was going to tackle for this episode is just going to be the B. And similar to what we did with letters like the D, I'm going to use the P to kind of create my base point for this. And similar to the lowercase e that we had earlier, we're going to run into an issue because there's not going to be enough height here to really do what we want to do. I'm just checking some measurements here as well. Back to the B, there we go. So as you can see, something like this, it actually makes a fantastic lowercase b, which is fine, but we need to stack two of these, and as you can imagine, that's going to start to create some problems. So we need to figure out how this might look. So I'm going to line those two up there, and of course this is going to look a little bit out of sorts for a moment. And we're definitely going to have to make these shorter in height. And again, part of me, so going back to the D, part of me is wondering if that might be a solution here. So what I'm going to do is we're actually going to get rid of all of these points. We're actually going to bring in these instead and see how that might work. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the E as kind of a reference point just for this crossbar. I suppose I could have used the H2, but the E was what I had on my mind. And we're just going to go ahead and just kind of loosely start blocking in kind of where some of these pieces might fit in. The other thing that I want to keep in mind as well is that this crossbar should leave a little bit more space on the bottom than it does on the top, which I think we're good there. And let's see if what I was hoping pans out here. So what I had in mind was basically just to bring this completely straight down. Of course, my shift key is not behaving the way I would like. There we go. So that is going to get a little bit compact there. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually open these corners back up, because I think that might be useful. And we're going to go ahead and make a copy of that. We're just going to stick that one in the corner on the top. And then just like some other letters, I'm going to just bring that in a little bit. And at least the pieces are there, although this is a fantastic mess right now. But this starts to give me the pieces that I need to figure this shape out a little bit. So obviously what we're seeing here, there's some major party collisions stuff going on here. And I'm just going to have to figure out how to solve something like that. So I think what I'm going to try is, rather than dealing with the collisions there, I'm going to bring that piece up and just see if there's a way we can kind of make this work. So what I mean by that is, if I bring that over, then I get a cross point there. And if I bring that over a little bit more, we'll get a point there as well. So kind of what I'm thinking is that we can line a couple of these shapes up. Oh, seems I have an open shape here as well, which we don't want. So let's fix that. There we go. But what I'm thinking, I'll correct my path directions as well there so everybody's nice and happy. So we'll delete that point. And let's get this one back together. Sometimes points just want to be cranky, and today's one of those days, I guess. So that kind of creates a nice part there. I am kind of wondering. So I guess really all I have to determine is how this is going to close up. Now this might end up being where, well, let's try it this way. So we'll take our knife tool again. I'm going to create a point there. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's create a point there. And let's create a point there. And we'll get rid of these external pieces that I don't need. So that's not too bad. But what I'm going to do is, let's bring this over a little bit. And I kind of wonder if I bring those 2 points together there. Now let's take this and just move it up. So, not terrible, but not great. I think in theory, yeah, in theory that was gonna work, but I don't think that's gonna land where I really want it to. So we'll bring that back across there. But what I have to determine, I was really hoping some of these would line up a little bit better, and they haven't. Now if I make a copy and pasted this, I'm kind of seeing where maybe that goes offline a little bit. But actually what I could do is maybe just take this and move it down. We'll bring this line just straight out a little bit. So that might actually be my solution, just to do something like that. So it's definitely an interesting shape. I guess there's no getting around that. And if I back out a little bit and just throw it in a couple words here. I mean, the width doesn't seem too terrible. I think we could even argue, just looking here, maybe it would help to kind of bring that out a little bit more. At the very least, so it looks the part is kind of what I'm thinking here. And then that might not be too bad, actually. But the other thing that I'm going to do as well, hopefully without messing things up too much, is I'm actually going to bump that in a little bit more. Doesn't seem like it's going to upset the balance of stuff too much here. But I think that's going to look a little bit better. It does start to kind of even up a little bit. So I think we'll maybe call that good on the B. It's, again, as I start creating more letters and more pieces here, we'll probably figure these out a little bit more as far as widths and shapes and all those things go. But for now, I think that's going to be a good place to stop for this episode. So we did get the uppercase caught up pretty well, I think, to the lowercase, and it seems like we've mostly got similar characters left to go as far as the end of the alphabet and a few of the angled characters like the K and the M. And as far as the uppercase, we'll still have some fun there as well. And really what you see on the screen here, just so you have an idea of kind of what's down the line here, is more or less this is going to be a simple typeface. So we'll go through, we'll do some numbers, we'll do some basic punctuation. So we are getting some pretty good progress on this. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you have any thoughts, comments, input, advice, you name it, feel free to pop into the comment section below. It's always fun to hear from others, learn from others, that kind of thing. And if you haven't already, if you've been enjoying this series, make sure to smash that like button. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please go ahead and make sure that you hit that subscribe button as well. I'm really working on building a lot of content on learning about how to design type, how to design fonts, and really just take kind of this intro beginner approach. And it seems like that's really resonating with a lot of people. As I said in previous episodes, it's been fun watching others reach out to me and just seeing what some of you are able to create after watching me go through and go through my process in this setting. So definitely keep those coming in as well. So with that said, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.